Hello, everyone. The 20th century is a time when the economy, culture, humanity's technology is thriving. And to decide who's the most powerful person in the world, nations decided to punch each other. In the year 1914, there's been a large-scale war in the world. It's never been bigger, and it's called the end of the war. Every life, war. Today we are known by the name. This is a world map of the 21st century, and this is a map of the world of the 20th century. You can see it. Countries looked very different back then. In the early 20th century, most Western countries followed imperialism and colonialism. Simply put, colonialism meant sending troops to bully weaker nations, expand territory, exploit and steal their resources to enrich their own country. This disgraceful ideology emerged in Europe in the 16th century. France and Russia were the three earliest empires and captured most of the countries in Europe, African and Asian colonization. And now Germany is emerging as a new empire. Germany's economy has now surpassed France's, and second in the world. However, because of development, it was late, so Germany was finished. Most of the world is occupied by it. France was colonized before. Germany wants its territory to be larger and richer. So this German will conspire. The French have to divide their land. Germany alone is not enough. So Germany has a lot for the coat and Italy. If you help me steal French land, then I'll give you a cup of milk tea. Remember a lot of pearls in there. Therefore, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy decided to form a gang and name it the Alliance. The Alliance prepares to arm, to steal the land and redivide the world. I know my colony is being watched. The French also invited each other to form a gang and called the group the Treaty Gang. Then the gang recruited more teammates from other countries, and the atmosphere on Earth became more tense than ever. Basically, the nations had divided into two opposing political blocs and were ready to fight at any moment. The world was like a ticking time bomb, one touch and it would explode. Austria-Hungary belonged to the Alliance, while Serbia was aligned with the Entente, so the two countries deeply resented each other. One day, the Archduke of Austria-Hungary and his wife were riding through the city in an open-top car. Knowing their schedule in advance, Serbian nationalists sent an assassin to kill him. The assassin waited and threw a bomb at their car. However, the bomb missed the Archduke's vehicle and instead hit a car in the convoy behind them. The assassination attempt failed. The Archduke escaped, and in the end, World War I did not break out. The Archduke decided to return to the hospital to visit the wounded members of his convoy. By sheer coincidence, he came face to face with the assassin who had previously failed to kill him. This time, the assassin fired a fatal shot at close range. The government of Austria-Hungary was furious about this, and they blamed Serbia for being involved in the incident. And in fact, there really was involvement. However, Austria-Hungary did not have any evidence to attack Serbia. SO Austria-Hungary decided to write an ultimatum and send it to Serbia to provoke them. In the letter, Austria-Hungary demanded that Serbia do extremely unreasonable things and also respond within 48 hours. Otherwise, Austria-Hungary would launch a war. In fact, Austria-Hungary did not expect Serbia to reply to the letter. They only used it to provoke Serbia and to create an excuse to justify the war. Austria-Hungary then called on its ally Germany to join in attacking Serbia together. And Germany was quite interested in the matter. On July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary fired the first shots into Serbian territory. Russia immediately mobilized to protect its bro Serbia. Seeing its ally being pushed around by Russia, Germany couldn't just sit there and officially declared war on Russia. Even though Russia was huge, its military was pretty clumsy. So Russia decided to hit up France and got them to gang up on Germany. Germany then sent France an ultimatum demanding that it stay out of the war. But France was still mad after getting absolutely wrecked by Germany in the Franco-Prussian War and losing 2 cities. Seeing this as the perfect chance for revenge, France declared war on Germany. In addition, France also invited Britain to join them. Hey bro, if I get beaten up, make sure you save me, okay? Britain decided not to get involved in this matter. At this point, Germany was caught between Russia and France. This general came up with an idea. Russia was very slow and would need at least 40 days to fully mobilize its forces. So during those 40 days, he will concentrate troops in the west, beat France to a pulp, then shift the army to the east and smash Russia. In the end, the war would be over and Germany would become the master of Europe. Germany was very confident of victory because at that time it was known as an extremely aggressive nation with a highly skilled army and many powerful military weapons. However, France had many defensive fortresses along the German-French border. To take down those fortresses, Germany would have needed a lot of time, and 40 days would not have been enough. So Germany tried to outflank France by marching its troops through Belgium and attacking the undefended areas of France. Germany also wanted Belgium to keep this plan secret. Belgium was a neutral country, so it did not stay silent when German troops violated its territory. Germany did not expect Belgium's army to be quite strong, and having to fight Belgium slowed the German forces down significantly compared to their original plan. However, Belgium was still not a match for Germany. While marching through Belgium, German troops killed many civilians and priests along the way, which greatly damaged Germany's image in the eyes of the international community. And President Woodrow Wilson acted like Jesus by strongly urging the European nations to stop fighting and make peace. However, a portion of German Americans strongly supported their homeland in the war. But when they heard about some of the brutal actions carried out by German troops in Belgium, they became less supportive. Britain was part of the Entente, but it did not want to get involved in this matter. However, after seeing Germany's disgraceful actions against a neutral country like Belgium, Britain became concerned that Germany might push its advantage and directly invade its own territory. So Britain sent an ultimatum to Germany, demanding that it withdraw its troops from Belgium. However, Germany ignored it, so Britain entered the war to teach Germany a lesson. Germany's destruction in Belgium echoed across Europe, and the surprise attack plan against France was exposed. France discovered Germany's scheme and quickly reinforced the Belgian-French border. Britain also sent troops to support France, and fierce fighting between Britain, France, and Germany broke out there. Although supported by Britain, pushing back the German army was not easy because Germany had extremely advanced military weapons, and it was only a little short of capturing Paris. Then, on the Eastern Front, Russia mobilized its troops much earlier than Germany had expected, not 40 days, and began shelling the Russian-German and Russian-Austro-Hungarian borders. Austria-Hungary, you handled the Russians. Okay. However, Austria-Hungary's army was quite weak. The commander of the Austro-Hungarian forces was this guy. Although he had a pretty handsome face, totally my type, he wasn't exactly the smartest commander. The guy kept ignoring Germany's advice and only acted on his own. But whenever he ran into trouble, he demanded that Germany come and rescue him. Germany had no other choice but to withdraw some troops from the Western Front in France to the Eastern Front in order to support Austria-Hungary. And this was an opportunity for France. France mobilized all its forces to repel the German army and successfully defended Paris. However, by the time they reached the Marne River, the French troops were utterly exhausted and unable to continue the pursuit. The Germans were in a similar situation, and both sides shifted to a defensive posture by digging trenches and holding their ground underground. This phase of the war is now known as trench warfare. The war entered a phase of stalemate, with neither side yielding to the other. The trench systems were expanded to 780 kilometers, stretching from the North Sea to the Swiss border. There were dozens of shootings and bombardments in a single day. If you made even the slightest mistake and stuck your head above the ground for just a moment, you lose it instantly in a storm of enemy bullets. Hundreds of thousands of men died just to gain a few kilometers of land. Life in the trenches was extremely miserable. The trenches were often flooded and had no proper drainage, so soldiers' feet became swollen and rotten from being soaked for too long. In addition, the damp environment in the trenches also created conditions for rats and bacteria to thrive. The soldiers had to live alongside corpses, the stench of decay, and various diseases. And their lives in the trenches went on like that for 4 years. In short, Germany had originally planned to crush France within 40 days, but after 4 years, there was still no decisive winner. Germany's plan for a quick victory had completely failed. Looking at the bigger picture at this point, Germany was now stuck in the middle. The Western Front was against France, and the Eastern Front against Russia, while Austria-Hungary was mostly useless. The longer the stalemate lasted, the worse it was for Germany. So Germany reduced troops in the west and shifted them east to deliver a decisive blow and force Russia out of the war. And Germany's military was truly formidable, while Russia, aside from being huge, was actually quite clumsy.
Russia's military system was conservative and outdated. Most Russian soldiers were peasants, largely illiterate, and lacking proper military training. Some didn't even know how to load a rifle. The officer corps was full of privileged elites with little battlefield experience. As a result, Russia got beaten badly by Germany and lost a vast stretch of territory. Despite taking heavy losses, the Tsar still refused to back down. Russia was stubborn, but by this point, German troops were also exhausted and no longer strong enough to push deeper. Germany's plan to kick Russia out of the war ultimately failed. A fairly notorious imperial power in Asia, Japan took advantage of Germany being busy fighting in Europe. Japan sent Germany an ultimatum demanding that Germany hand over one of its colonies, Jiaozhou in China, and required a reply within 8 days. Germany did not respond to the ultimatum. As a result, Japan declared war on Germany and quickly seized Jiaozhou. While at it, Japan also grabbed several of Germany's colonial islands in the Pacific. Almost forgot. Germany still had another buddy, Italy. Italy was part of the alliance, but chose to stay neutral and didn't want to join the war. The Entente then tempted Italy by promising to give it some Austro-Hungarian territory if Italy helped them win the war. And Italy probably realized there was a high chance Germany would get wrecked, so Italy switched sides. Austria-Hungary called Italy a traitor and decided to teach it a lesson, declaring war on Italy. Germany was in serious trouble, carrying the whole team while also being betrayed by its own ally. But fortunately for Germany at this point, the Ottoman Empire, a neighbor of Russia that had held a long-standing grudge against it, was still around. Knowing this, Germany persuaded the Ottomans to join the alliance. The Ottoman Empire officially joined the alliance and declared war on Russia. However, the Ottomans didn't seem very smart. Their first plan was to cross the Caucasus Mountains to attack Russia, but they failed to anticipate the brutal cold, and large numbers of their soldiers froze to death. After that, the Ottoman Empire shifted its focus to seizing the Suez Canal, which was under British control. But British forces were too strong, so the Ottomans got beaten again. They later launched several more campaigns, but all of them ended in failure. At that time, within the Ottoman Empire, there was an ethnic group called the Armenians. Armenians lived in Ottoman territory, but they were relatively close to Russia because they shared the same religion. The Ottoman government irrationally blamed its repeated military defeats on the Armenians. It then carried out a genocide against them, resulting in the deaths of nearly 1 million Armenians. This event shocked world public opinion at the time. Returning to Germany after a series of defeats, Germany came up with a new idea. In Central Asia at that time, India and Afghanistan were under British colonial rule. Germany clearly knew that if the two colonies went to war with each other, the mother country, Britain, would face trouble, and Germany would take advantage of that chaos to eliminate Britain entirely. And Germany decided to carry out that plan by sending agents to Afghanistan to spread propaganda, urging the people to rise up and gain independence from Britain, as well as to attack their neighbor, India. However, Germany not only failed to persuade Afghanistan, but its instigating actions also enraged India, and India declared that it would punch Germany in the face. Thus, Germany's instigation plan collapsed and even brought about a new enemy, India. Before the war broke out, the countries negotiated rules that were forbidden in warfare. First, the use of chemical weapons was not allowed. Second, killing civilians was prohibited. Finally, whoever violated the rules would be a dog. And Germany decided it would be the dog. Germany began ruthlessly dropping bombs on British cities, using chemical weapons and launching gas attacks. At the same time, it used submarines to sink British merchant ships. Germany's submarine strategy was extremely effective, and Britain had no way to stop it. Numerous British cargo ships were sunk, the economy was strangled, famine began to appear at home, and Britain stood on the brink of defeat. By chance, Germany accidentally fired on an American ship, causing 128 sailors to lose their lives. This incident turned the United States from a neutral country into one that no longer had a good impression of Germany. On the southern front at this time, Austria-Hungary had still not finished dealing with Serbia. Bulgaria is a neighboring country of Serbia and was still bitter about losing to Serbia in several previous wars. Germany and Austria-Hungary tempted Bulgaria by promising that if it joined the alliance, whatever it wanted would be granted. so Bulgaria decided to join the alliance and take the opportunity to get revenge on Serbia. Being attacked by both Austria-Hungary and Bulgaria at the same time, Serbia collapsed. In 1917, the world had been fighting for 3 years, and the war had passed its peak. But the question was, which country would be the first to cease fire and withdraw from the war?
In the next video, we will witness the final battle of the war. Late 1918, the last great offensive begins. Armies clash one final time, empires crumble, and the fate of Europe is decided. By 1977, the world had been at war for 3 years and the conflict had already passed its peak. But the question was, which country would be the first to agree to a ceasefire and withdraw from the war? And the answer was Russia. Although Russia had a vast national territory, its economy at that time was fundamentally not as strong as that of Britain, France, or Germany to sustain the war effort. The Russian government mobilized up to 10 million people and imposed numerous additional taxes. This led to a severe shortage of agricultural labor, and after 3 years of fighting, Russia's economy had fallen to an alarming level. This drove the Russian people into severe hardship, with millions dying of starvation. Inexperienced aristocratic officers led the army, and Russia suffered defeats against Germany on many fronts. As a result, public anger spread, and social tensions inside the country intensified. In May 1977, a young man named Vladimir Lenin gave a speech calling on the people to strike and protest against the war. The movement quickly spread across Russia, and by October 1977, a mass uprising broke out what we now know as the Russian October Revolution. The Russian October Revolution was a major turning point, shaping not only Russia's future, but also influencing many nations around the world. After the victory of the October Revolution, the Tsar was overthrown. Vladimir Lenin proclaimed the establishment of the Soviet state, accepted the loss of some territory to Germany, and the new government's first decree was to withdraw from the war. The new government took land from landlords and gave it to the peasants to rebuild the economy and ease suffering. Russia became the first country to leave the war, allowing Germany to move its troops west and focus on defeating Britain and France. However, Germany realized there was a bigger issue: the United States. Although officially neutral at first, the United States benefited greatly from the war, making huge profits by producing and selling weapons to the countries involved in the conflict. By 1977, most nations were exhausted by war, while the United States had become the world's top economic and military power. Seeing this threat, Germany began planning to harass the United States. Mexico is a neighbor of the United States. In the past, the United States defeated Mexico and took 3 states, Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico. Knowing this hostility, Germany reused its old tactic by sending a telegram to Mexico, urging it to attack the United States and take back the lost territories. Germany also promised to support Mexico in this plan. However, bad luck for Germany, the Zimmerman telegram hadn't even reached Mexico yet when British intelligence caught them red-handed. The Brits snitched to the US about this whole thing, and of course Germany's dirty play made the US lose patience. Germany was already infamous for being downright shameless with their brutal destruction in Belgium, plus the German U-boats sinking American merchant ships. So right from the start, the US already hated Germany's guts. However, strategically speaking, the United States had lent huge amounts of money to United Kingdom, France, and other allied powers to fund the war. If the Allies were defeated, America would lose that money. Moreover, if Germany won, it would dominate Europe, and with its aggressive nature, it likely would not ignore the Americas, putting the United States at risk. Therefore, the US did not want Germany to win. In other words, it had to ensure Germany's defeat. This telegram became the perfect excuse. On April 6, 1917, America declared they were going to smash Germany's face in. Back in Europe at that time, the British and French forces were basically exhausted. Ever since Russia surrendered, the Germans had thrown their entire main strength onto the Western Front and launched devastating attacks on France and Britain. Those German storm assaults were incredibly fierce, and Paris was just one step away from falling into German hands. Germany believed victory was within reach. Even Wilhelm II announced that March 24th would be celebrated as a national holiday. However, 1 million American troops arrived in Europe, reinforcing United Kingdom and France news that could not have been worse for Germany. After 4 years of war, Germany's forces were exhausted, while the United States had just entered the conflict and was at its strongest. What happened next, you already know. German troops were heavily defeated, and all the territories they had struggled to seize over 4 years were lost within just a few months. In only 6 months, Germany's forces dropped from 5.2 million to just 4.1 million. Germany had mobilized almost all available men, but by June 1918, it was heavily outnumbered by the United Kingdom, France, and the United States, leaving it unable to continue resisting. By the end of September 1918, the Central Powers surrendered to the Allies, and Germany officially lost the war. Many Germans could hardly believe that Germany had lost so quickly. It was a truly bitter defeat, especially when they had come so close to victory. The people were outraged, and several internal uprisings broke out in Germany. Wilhelm II was forced to abdicate and flee to the Netherlands for asylum. The German Empire collapsed, its territory was reduced, and it was renamed the Weimar Republic. Other empires, such as Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire, also collapsed and was divided into smaller countries. However, I will explain this more clearly in another video. After that, Germany was forced by the victorious side to sign the Treaty of Versailles, officially ending World War I, including the requirement that Germany give up part of its territory, required to disband its army and pay massive war reparations to the victorious nations. After the war, about 1.5 billion people had been drawn into the conflict, with 10 million dead and 20 million wounded or permanently disabled. Although the United Kingdom and France were the victors, their losses were even worse than Germany. The only real winner was the United States, which grew rich from selling weapons, doubled its economy, and avoided destruction. Most European nations also became debtors to the U.S. And in World War I, not only Europe fought, many colonies were dragged into the conflict as well. The Treaty of Versailles did not truly bring peace. Its harsh and unfair terms only created deep resentment between the defeated and the victors. 20 years after World War I ended, a man exploited the weaknesses of that treaty to build a new empire and launch a war far greater and more devastating than the first, a war we now know as. Hello everyone. Have you ever heard of the genocide that killed more than 6 million Jews? Or World War II, which caused the deaths of over 85 million people worldwide? And the person responsible for these two bloody events, you have probably heard his name before. Here's the world map. Let's zoom in. We can see this is Europe, and right here is the border between Germany and Austria. On April 20th, 1889, an innocent baby was born there, and that baby was Adolf Hitler. Hitler's father was Alois Hitler. Before Adolf Hitler was born, Alois had already been married twice. His first wife was Anna Glasser-Röhr, but she was often ill. Later, he married his second wife, Franziska Matzelsberger, and had 2 children with her. However, his second wife later became seriously ill. Alois Hitler asked his cousin, Clara Pausel, to help take care of his wife. Not long after his second wife passed away, Alois decided to marry Clara. Clara Pausel and Alois Hitler had 4 children, Gustav, Ida, Otto, and Adolf Hitler. The first 3 died young, leaving Adolf as the only surviving child at the time, and he was deeply loved by his mother. Later, he also had a younger brother. Adolf Hitler was enrolled in a public elementary school by his family. He made a good impression on the principal, who described him as a bright and well-behaved child. Sometimes he was quite hyperactive. As the family faced financial hardship, his father, Alois Hitler, became hot-tempered and often beat Adolf Hitler when he made mistakes. At the age of 8, Adolf Hitler joined the church choir and dreamed of becoming a priest. Around that time, his younger brother died of measles, deeply affecting him. From an energetic and lively boy, Adolf Hitler gradually became cold, quiet, and often talked back to his teachers. He grew undisciplined, and his academic performance declined. This angered his father, Alois Hitler, who constantly pushed him to become a diligent civil servant like himself. The conflict between Adolf Hitler and his father kept growing. After his father, Alois Hitler, passed away, Hitler was no longer beaten. In 1907, at 18, he moved to Vienna, capital of Austria, hoping to become a painter. However, Adolf Hitler failed to impress the professors and was rejected. In December 1908, his mother died of breast cancer. Without her financial support, he entered one of the hardest periods of his life, becoming homeless and surviving on charity soup kitchens and the streets. To earn a living, Adolf Hitler took various jobs, such as shoveling snow, carrying luggage at railway stations, and working as a construction laborer. Later, he became a freelance painter, selling watercolor landscapes in Vienna to tourists. This work improved his artistic skills. Adolf Hitler's paintings were praised for being so precise they looked like photographs. However, critics said they felt cold and lacked emotion, suggesting he was better suited to be an architect than a painter. Of course, Adolf Hitler could never paint as well as I do. No one knows exactly when his anti-Jewish views began, but many historians believe hardship shaped his distorted mindset. Sir, can you share when the thinking of excluding Jews first formed in you? Fuck your mother. During this time, the political situation in Vienna City began to get tense. Hitler was first exposed to racist arguments. For example, this mayor followed extreme nationalism, openly spread anti-Jewish ideas, and Hitler idolized him greatly. At this time, Hitler got his draft notice, but was rejected by the Austro-Hungarian army for being unfit. He refused to serve Austria. Later, he called his army a bunch of animals. In May 1913, Hitler moved to Munich, Germany. In August 1914, World War I broke out. News spread quickly across Europe within days. Despite Austrian citizenship, Hitler somehow volunteered and joined the German army. Although the battlefield was brutal, Hitler showed no fear and later called it the most wonderful time of his life. Hitler decided that war was the true purpose of his life. He was reported as a brave soldier and received the Iron Cross in 1914. For a lowly soldier like Hitler, receiving this medal was unimaginable. In October 1916, Hitler was wounded when a bomb exploded in the bunker. He returned to the city for treatment. During treatment there, Hitler was irritated seeing anti-war protests from the peace-loving community. As a war enthusiast, he naturally disliked this, and Hitler silently vowed that one day he would exterminate these people. After finishing treatment, he returned to the front line. In October 1918, Hitler was temporarily blinded by a gas attack and had to return for treatment again. And during this time, the German army was defeated, and this news was nothing short of a shock to Hitler. To Hitler, the German army was an invincible force that could not be defeated on the battlefield, and the loss could only be due to being stabbed in the back by communist and Jewish civilian leaders. And Hitler swore that one day he would make those people pay. In reality, Germany's defeat had nothing to do with communists or Jews. It was due to complete exhaustion from prolonged military campaigns, and above all, being overwhelmed by the United States' superior power after America entered the war. However, one thing. What does Germany winning or losing have to do with you? You're Austrian. I am German. After World War I, Germany was the defeated nation, while the three victorious powers were the United States, Britain, and France. Germany was forced to sign the Treaty of Versailles in 1919 to end the war. The terms included giving up territory to France, Poland, and Denmark, reducing its military to a minimal level, and paying war reparations of $5 billion in 1919. After the war ended, Adolf Hitler returned to Munich. However, lacking qualifications, he didn't know how to make a living. Hitler applied to serve on active duty as an informant. The unfair terms of the Treaty of Versailles caused deep anger among the German people. Political divisions grew, and the government saw a serious threat, especially from communist groups. Adolf Hitler was assigned to spy on political parties and report potential threats. During one mission, he found a new party called the German Workers' Party, whose red flag and name sounded quite communist. Adolf Hitler attended one of their meetings and realized they were not communist at all. The members regularly discussed nationalism and anti-Semitism. Feeling the party suited him, he joined and became member number 555. In March 1920, Adolf Hitler left the army to devote himself fully to the party. He quickly impressed the leadership and supporters with his speaking skills, and his political career began to rise during this period. The German Workers' Party was renamed the National Socialist German Workers' Party, later known as the Nazi Party. On its red flag, Adolf Hitler added a swastika, creating what would become one of the deadliest symbols in human history. Germany's economy collapsed under heavy war reparations to Britain, France, and the United States. As its resources ran out, Germany printed more money to pay them. However, printing more money did not make the country richer. It only caused the currency to lose value, a situation economists call inflation. In 1919, one US dollar was equal to 4.5 German marks. However, by 1923, the mark had become so worthless, it was worth less than scrap paper. and the German people bore the consequences. The people were exhausted from working day after day and still not having enough to eat. At times, it took a truckload of money just to buy a loaf of bread. Public anger grew, and Adolf Hitler saw this as the right moment to make a revolution. Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party organized many public rallies to attract supporters. They even drove trucks around Munich, waving swastika flags and handing out leaflets to promote the events. Hitler represented the party and delivered speeches at these gatherings. Adolf Hitler quickly gained fame through speeches attacking the Treaty of Versailles. He claimed that only those of pure German blood were superior, while Jews were inferior and did not deserve to live in the country. At the same time, he promised to restore Germany to its former glory. Adolf Hitler also formed a private force called the Storm Battalion SA, whose mission was to protect his speeches from disruption. The Storm Battalion SA continued recruiting. Because the Treaty of Versailles forced Germany to reduce its army, many unemployed ex-soldiers joined Adolf Hitler's force. This helped the force grow larger and stronger over time. Hitler adopted fascism as the face and core policy of the Nazi Party. In short, fascism is an extremely barbaric ideology that advocates terrorism and aggressive wars of conquest to dominate the world. Seeing his forces were strong enough, Adolf Hitler decided to launch a coup. On November 8, 1923, Adolf Hitler led his forces and supporters in a march aimed at overthrowing the government. He was confident that his influence would cause the police to side with him. But Adolf Hitler was wrong. About 16 Nazi Party members and 4 police officers were killed in the failed coup. Adolf Hitler was arrested and charged with treason on November 11, 1923. During the trial, Adolf Hitler showed no fear. Instead, he used his powerful oratory skills to turn the courtroom into a political speech. The judges were captivated by his words and saw him as a charismatic figure. Adolf Hitler could have faced life in prison, but after winning over the judges, he was sentenced to only 5 years. Although it was called imprisonment, the cell was as comfortable as a 5-star hotel. During this time, Adolf Hitler wrote an autobiographical book expressing his extreme political views. Throughout the book, Jews were described as a disease, and the only solution was to kill them all. The incident quickly spread nationwide through the media, and Adolf Hitler's name became widely known. Although he was sentenced to 5 years, he was released after just 9 months, spending a little over a year in total, including pretrial detention. The United States initially showed leniency by extending Germany's reparation deadlines and lending money to help rebuild after the war. However, on October 24, 1929, the stock market on Wall Street collapsed, and the U.S. entered the Great Depression, leading to massive bankruptcies and unemployment. In this context, America demanded that Germany repay its debts. Combined with the heavy war reparations, this became a devastating blow to Germany. Life grew even harsher, unemployment soared, poverty spread everywhere, and public anger toward the government continued to rise. The people grew tired of the government's leadership and began supporting extreme political ideas. Adolf Hitler quickly seized this opportunity and held a series of speeches to attract public support. Adolf Hitler promised to free Germany from the chains of the Treaty of Versailles, rebuild the economy, and create jobs. The Nazi Party used its resources to promote him as a powerful and great leader, and in the eyes of many at that time, Adolf Hitler appeared like a savior. All of this helped the Nazi Party grow stronger, while democratic parties became increasingly powerless against the rising wave of extremism. In the 1932 election, the Nazi Party became the largest party in Germany, followed by the Communists. Though Austrian, Adolf Hitler had served in the German army, and in 1925 Austria stripped him of his citizenship. In any case, Adolf Hitler preferred to be German, but gaining citizenship was difficult. Without it, he could not run for office and risk deportation. However, on February 25, 1932, the Interior Minister, also a member of the Nazi Party, appointed Adolf Hitler as a state delegate in Berlin, which granted him German citizenship. From then on, he grew increasingly arrogant and began to see himself as Germany's savior. Adolf Hitler decided to run for president, and his campaign was fairly successful. However, he received fewer votes than Paul von Hindenburg. Although he lost the election, he proved he was a major figure in German politics. After losing the presidential race, Adolf Hitler wrote to President Paul von Hindenburg asking to be appointed chancellor. However, The president saw him as a fanatical racist with extreme views and refused, appointing someone else instead. Adolf Hitler knew he was an important figure in the Nazi Party and that his supporters relied on him. He threw tantrums, cried, and said he would commit suicide if he was not made chancellor. This crocodile tears tactic softened the public and created pressure, causing the chancellor out of fear to resign. Under such pressure, no one else dared to take the position, and President Hindenburg reluctantly appointed Adolf Hitler as chancellor on January 30th, 1933. He officially became Chancellor of Germany with the support of much of the public, who believed he would use his power to rescue them from hardship. However, their nightmare in the world was only beginning. Although he had become Chancellor, Adolf Hitler still did not have full dictatorial power. On February 27, 1933, the German Parliament building, the Reichstag building, was set on fire. Hitler blamed the communists, though many historians believe the Nazis themselves were responsible. Adolf Hitler persuaded President Paul von Hindenburg to sign a decree he had drafted, allowing him to arrest communists and his political opponents. Around 4,000 Communist Party members, including many leaders, were arrested. With just one move, Adolf Hitler rounded up and eliminated his opponents, leaving only the president. Soon after, President Hindenburg, old and frail, died, clearing the way for Hitler. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Adolf Hitler drafted a law merging the positions of Chancellor and President into one, granting himself full authority over Germany. For the law to pass, it required approval and votes from members of the Reichstag. After eliminating the communists and other rivals, the Reichstag was filled with members of the Nazi Party and his allies. The vote became a mere formality. Adolf Hitler had now officially become the supreme leader. Now, the law of Germany was Hitler. He was the law. But he still faced one problem: the German army. The SA wanted to replace the regular army, which the military strongly opposed. Adolf Hitler knew backing the SA could cause internal conflict, so he chose to secure the support of the professional army instead of the undisciplined Storm Battalion. However, rejecting this demand was risky, as the Storm Battalion had around 500,000 members. If its officers rebelled or resorted to violence, the consequences would be unpredictable. So how did he respond to the demands of the Storm officers and soldiers? Very simply, kill them all. Soon after, a bloody purge took place, later known as the Night of the Long Knives. In June 1934, Adolf Hitler ordered the elimination of the stormtroopers' officers. To secure his power, also had former political opponents, their secretaries who were present, critical journalists, relatives, and even a few unrelated individuals killed. Like this man here. After the Night of the Long Knives, the official report listed about 85 people killed, but the real number may have reached several hundred. Many stormtroopers officers once close the lives who helped. Adolf Hitler rise to power never imagined that the man behind their deaths would be Hitler himself. From that point on, Adolf Hitler faced no more internal threats. The army no longer feared being replaced and swore loyalty to Hitler. His power became absolute. The Nazi Party transformed Germany into Nazi Germany, and the national flag was replaced with the swastika banner. From then on, the German people lived under a brutal dictatorship. Freedom of the press, speech, and assembly were suspended. All other political parties were crushed. The Nazi Party became the only legal party in Germany. The next group Adolf Hitler targeted was the Jews. At first, he introduced laws restricting their rights and organized boycotts. Soon after, Jews were arrested and tried without cause. Across the country, they were hunted down and sent to concentration camps built under his regime. In these camps, they were brutally abused, starved, forced into exhausting labor. And when they could no longer work, many were executed. Adolf Hitler built hundreds of concentration camps, and by 1945, about 6 million Jews had been killed under his regime. He also created the Hitler Youth to indoctrinate the young. Boys aged 10 to 14 were required to join, train for war, and encouraged to become aggressive. Girls were taught that their duty was to bear racially pure German children, and some became pregnant at a young age. Even greetings were strictly regulated. If you deliberately used the wrong greeting, you could very likely be shot. Now Germany was forced to support Adolf Hitler. anyone who dared oppose him in any way, even mocking his mustache, as ridiculous, you would face the most brutal death. The aggressive foreign policy of Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany soon shocked the world. Before long, he dragged the globe into a devastating global conflict known as. However, World War II was an extremely complex conflict, and this video isn't long enough to cover it fully. I'll save it for the next video, so stay tuned. Nazi Germany was severely damaged in World War II. By early 1945, it was on the brink of total military collapse. Adolf Hitler retreated to a bunker in Berlin, choosing death over becoming a prisoner of the Soviet Red Army. Adolf Hitler chose to end his life with a gun. Nazi Germany and his dictatorship officially collapsed after 12 years in power. Today, Hitler is remembered as a brutal butcher. Adolf Hitler was once just a boy with dreams. Just like many other children, because of an abusive father, a poor youth spent wandering the streets. An exposure to distorted ideologies, Adolf Hitler was shaped into a figure whose brutality terrified the world. The deadly swastika flag and the crimes of his regime would forever haunt humanity throughout history. Before ending the video, before committing suicide, Adolf Hitler ordered his men to burn his body to avoid identification by the Soviet Red Army. When they arrived, only a charred corpse remained. Doctors later confirmed it was his through dental records. However, modern scientific tests have examined the DNA and claimed that it was not Hitler's body. Whether Hitler truly died or not remains controversial, and it is very possible that he is still alive today, secretly planning revenge on the world and one day.
The sky over the Fertile Crescent darkened, not because the sun was setting, but because war was drawing near. In this fertile land, where humanity first learned to farm, to build cities, to write laws, they also learned another lesson, far more ruthless. To survive, you must be ready to kill. The city of Usher lay quietly beside the river, not large, not heavily fortified, not frightening. Its low, thin stone walls were built by a people who had never imagined they would one day become anyone's nightmare. Assyria, at this time, was only a small city-state, not an empire, not a dominant power, just a fading name between mighty Babylon in the south and ambitious Mitanni in the north. And then, the circle closed. In the distance, clouds of war horses stirred the dust. Babylon's banners appeared first. Soon after, the armies of Mitanni rolled in like a rising tide. They didn't need to attack. They only needed to stand there. Because everyone knew Asher did not have enough soldiers, not enough food, not enough time. Inside the city, alarm bells rang. Soldiers gathered. They looked at one another, and no one needed to speak the obvious truth. If the city fell, there would be no negotiation, no mercy, no second chance. In the Fertile Crescent, the weak were erased from history faster than from the battlefield. Night fell. Outside the walls, enemy camps burned bright with firelight. Inside Asher, flames flickered low, every piece of wood carefully spared. Fear began to spread like a disease. Not the fear of death, but the fear of dying for nothing. The council of elders gathered. No one spoke of victory. They asked only one question: how do we survive? No one answered at once, because the answer was hard to accept. Assyria understood they could not win with numbers, could not win with walls, could not win with reputation. So, what was left? Will. That night, no one slept. Men stood upon the walls, spears in hand, staring down at the sea of enemy tents below. They understood one thing: if they trembled, the enemy would strike. If they begged, the enemy would crush them. But if they became unpredictable, an order was given, not written, not proclaimed. The gates of Usher opened in the darkness. Not the entire army, just a small group, men willing to die, as long as the enemy learned to fear. They slipped silently into the night. No drums, no horns. Their target was not the main camp, but the weakest point, a watchpost, a unit careless enough to believe Assyria was already broken. The attack was swift, short, without mercy. When the sun rose, the bodies were displayed before the city gates, not to boast of victory, but to send a message. Babylon saw, Mitanni saw, and they suddenly understood something terrifying. Assyria was no longer afraid of death. From that moment on, the siege was no longer a waiting game. It became a battle of spirit. And in that battle, Assyria had just taken its first steps, on a path from which it would never turn back. After that night, Ashur was no longer a city under siege. It became something the enemy could not understand. Babylon reinforced its guards. Mitanni built additional barricades. But the more cautious they became, the more exhausted they grew, because Assyria did not fight in the usual way. They did not seek a decisive battle. They did not need to seize land. They did not need to plant a flag. They needed only one thing: fear spreading faster than the blade. Small units slipped out of the city again and again at night, always fewer in number, always striking where no one expected. A supply caravan vanished, a watch post left with no survivors, a low-ranking officer killed inside his own tent. No warning signs, no victories to celebrate, only prolonged unease. Inside Ashur, the mindset was changing as well. War was no longer a tragedy. It became a tool. Children grew up hearing stories of night raids. The elderly no longer prayed for peace. They prayed to be ruthless enough not to be erased. Assyria began to remember a new law of the world. He who makes others afraid will fear no one. Prisoners were not executed immediately. They were released, not out of mercy, but for a word to spread. They carry stories of a small city-state willing to fight to the last man. Assyria's reputation grew, not through territory, but through dread. Eventually the siege loosened, not because Ashur had become stronger, but because the cost of destroying it had become too high. Assyria survived, but the price they paid was the people they once were. From that moment on, Assyria no longer asked, "How do we avoid death?" They began to ask, "How do we make sure no one dares challenge us again?" And that question would lead them from a small city-state onto the path of becoming the nightmare of the ancient Middle East. In the year 1695, right at the end of the 17th century, a Spanish monk fled barefoot and starving through the tropical forests of Central America. His name was Andres de Avendano y Loyola, and along with his men, he was dying of thirst and hunger. Their faces had been torn by thorns, and his feet cut open by pieces of flint scattering the swampy ground. Avendano and his men had been part of a mission to the city of Tayasal, an island stronghold that was the last independent holdout of a once mighty civilization, the Maya. Avendano's mission had been to convince the Mayan king of Tayasal to convert to Christianity and to accept the dominion of Spanish control, which had now spread to cover most of Central and South America. But Avendano's mission had failed. The Mayan people of Tayasal had rejected him, and now Avendano and his men fled through the jungle back to Spanish lands. Their journey was hard and treacherous. They climbed over hill after hill, through thick forest cover, desperate for food and water, their legs almost giving out from under them. But then they came over the crest of one hill and saw something that stopped them in their tracks. It was an enormous pyramid of stone, jutting out of the forest canopy, tangled with roots and vines. Although Avendano was weak from hunger and thirst, he still found strength enough to approach the ruins. There was a great variety of old buildings, and though they were very high, and my strength was little, I climbed up them, though with some trouble. They were in the form of a convent, with the small cloisters and many living rooms, all roofed over and arched like a wagon, and whitened inside with plaster. It seemed to us that these buildings must stand near a settlement, but we found ourselves, as we saw afterwards, very far from a settlement. At the time that Avendano stumbled across this ruined city, the Mayan civilization was a shadow of its former glory. The invasion of the Spanish in the 16th century had spread diseases like smallpox that harrowed the Mayan population long before the Spanish conquistadors arrived, with guns, steel blades, and war dogs to subjugate the remaining population. Avendano had seen Mayan people living relatively simple lives on the northern coast of the Yucatan Peninsula, but what he encountered here was something different. These were the ruins of a city that rivaled the ancient capitals of the Old World in size, magnificence, and grandeur. Avendano couldn't have known it then, but he had stumbled across the ruins of the great Mayan capital of Tikal. For 7 centuries, Tikal had ruled a vast empire, conquered its enemies, and raised monuments of astonishing size and quality. Tikal wasn't alone. It was just one of at least 40 Mayan cities that have flourished in this region, giving birth to a thriving and colorful culture of arts and literature. Then, over 500 years before any European first set foot on the American continent, this complex society had collapsed. The great city of Tikal was abandoned along with every single other city in the area. After this catastrophe, the forest swept in to reclaim the stones of Tikal. Its imposing pyramids were left to crumble one by one into the earth. And the story of exactly what happened is still one of humanity's greatest mysteries. My name's Paul Cooper, and you're listening to the Fall of Civilizations podcast. Every episode, I look at a civilization of the past that rose to glory and then collapsed into the ashes of history. I want to ask, what did they have in common? What led to their fall? And what did it feel like to be a person alive at the time who witnessed the end of their world? In this episode, I want to look at that great romantic mystery, the fall of the classic Maya civilization. I want to show how this great civilization grew up among environmental conditions that no other society has ever contended with. I want to explore the fatal flaws that lay beneath the surface of this civilization and describe what happened after its final and cataclysmic collapse. Despite Avendano's encounter with the ruins of Tikal, the legacy of the Mayan civilization didn't really capture the world's attention until the early decades of the 19th century. This is down to the work of the American writer and explorer John Lloyd Stevens and his artist companion Catherwood. The pair had traveled together for 2 weeks through the deep Guatemalan interior, following rumors that the ruins of an ancient city lay somewhere in the jungle. They traveled in greater comfort than Avendano, but their journey was still difficult.